Two. You know, humor is a funny thing. It seems that the joke is the joke because of the punchline and the fact that there's such a strong element of truth in that punchline. You know, as I was researching for this particular episode, which is about relevancy in marketing, I'm a little embarrassed to say I spent a lot more time than I should have looking at marketing comics. But you know, as I was looking at them, there's just such a strong element of truth that we often don't want to admit to. So I want to share some of those with you. Things like these foxes that are looking to dress things up in hopes of they're pulling the wool over their audience's eyes. Or looking for engagement in all the wrong places and just more interested in the likes than actually engaging with your audience where you'd like to be. And then, of course, one of our favorites around here, playing buzzword bingo. Hey, Rogue Nation, this is Chip Rosales, and I am so glad you're here with us for another episode of While You Were Working. You know, if you're like me, you didn't get into this business to just be bland and to blend in and to just be average. You got in this business to make a difference and to be relevant. And so if you're like me and you want to stay relevant in 2019, then you're not going to want to miss a second of today's episode. Also, if you're an email marketer, I want you to pay close attention because we've got some really cool things that are coming down the pipe that you're going to want to hear about. That's because this week we have with us the CMO of BSN Sports, Jared Drinkwater. He's also an industry veteran of Frito-Lay and Pizza Hut. But at BSN Sports, one of the things that what they are known for is they are the largest supplier of equipment and apparel for sports teams in the United States. So that's a pretty amazing job. There's some really cool things that they're doing over at BSN Sports. Jared, we're really glad that you're with us today. And, you know, all those things aside, I have heard through the grapevine that you're actually kind of a big deal in China.
Well, big deal is all relative, but thanks for having me, Chip. Yeah, no, the China story is when I was 5, I got my first taste of what the advertising world was all about. I was living in Hong Kong with my mom and dad. My dad had business over there for about 4 months and went to nursery school there and got approached to be in a Chinese milk commercial. So I ended up doing it, and they gave me a glass of milk to drink. I had no lines, but I took my first sip of milk, and it was probably the worst drink I've ever had in my entire life, and I spit it out. And it probably took 50 takes for them to get something maybe they could use, but I'm certainly sure that it didn't look authentic, and it probably didn't sell any more milk for them. So it was just example number one of making sure that whoever you're going to get to sell your product actually enjoys it, because consumers can see through authenticity.
That marketing must be in the blood. It starts all the way from 4 years old. So, well, we don't have 4-year-old Jared with us today. We've got quite accomplished Jared with us today. Hey, here at Rogue, you know a little bit about us. You actually probably know a lot about us, and we like to do things just a little bit different. We are about trying to stand out and just do it a little bit different. So I was wondering if you might share a story of yours where you realized that, in fact, you know what? I'm not going to do things the way everybody else is doing them. I'm going to do things just a little bit different.
Yeah, so I think for me that lesson came about 18 years ago, and has been kind of the foundational point for how I approach my job in marketing specifically. This was back in 2002, was applying to business school because I wanted to go get my MBA to become a brand marketer. And my test scores were just okay. Applications were as high as they had ever been. And I knew I had to do something a little bit silly to stand out. So what I did was create a pack of personalized baseball cards that I threw in with my applications. And really, the front of the card was an experience that shaped my life. The back of the card, like the stats, was a little bit of a description. I wrapped it with a stick of gum and homemade, kind of baseball card wrapping paper, and sent those off. And was fortunate enough to get into at least one school. And when I was at the orientation in front of my classmates, the admissions director was talking about all the accomplishments of people that were in the Olympics, started businesses, and she mentioned the baseball card. So really a long-winded way of saying, yeah, definitely do things to stand out and get noticed, or else you'll just kind of be wallpaper.
Man, I love that story. That's so cool. Sounds like it's just fantastic. Sounds like RFP material there. It sounds like getting into college material. All of that is just fantastic. I love it. And then, of course, setting you up to have kind of the dream job you've got right now inside that sports area. I know so many of us are super excited when we hear about people who get to lead marketing over at sports agencies. We were talking earlier about how to stay relevant. That's what we're talking about today, is staying relevant. And in many ways, it's actually pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. But we have a saying around here at Rogue that says simple is hard. And as we were thinking about this, you say it is pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. There are three things that a brand needs. And I want to let the audience hear from you. What are those three things that every brand needs?
Yeah. So again, as we discussed, Chip, really not rocket science, but hard to apply day to day, especially for marketers that are so pressured to drive sales overnight. It's really about how can you build your brand over time that makes the difference and will build your legacy. So for me, it's kind of three things. The first one is brands today need to have a point of view on the world and share it. I think gone are the days where brands could kind of sit back and let culture unfold around it. They need to jump in. The one example I use a lot on this is Patagonia. Patagonia is all about the environment, and even with an administration that is less than friendly on the environment, they've used the opportunity to double down. And it's a little bit controversial, and they don't make friends all the time. But every time they double down on an initiative that has to do with the environment and share their point of view. Read a recent article in Forbes that said their profits triple. Nike's a great example of this and everything that they've done recently with Colin Kaepernick. And again, a lightning rod. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that every brand should get political, but they had a very strong point of the view of the world. That's really been the mantra and the foundation for Just Do It. And they made a statement, and it angered a lot of folks, but in many ways kind of brought them to the forefront of culture and conversation, and I think as evidenced by their stock price and sales over the last month, it was a gamble that certainly paid off.
Right. So this point of view, it did exactly that. Just made a statement. The point of view got them noticed and set them apart. So first step is have a point of view.
So that's number one. Number two, you can't just have a point of view and talk about it. You got to go do it. So you really got to do as much as you say. An example of this is something when I was running the Doritos brand marketing team. Doritos is all about bold experiences, doing things differently, that iconic crunch and taste you get from a Dorito. And we launched a chip called Doritos Jacked that was twice the size and had twice the crunch of a normal Dorito. So instead of just telling consumers that, we felt like we needed to go into the real world and make a big statement to show our boldness. And so we went to South by Southwest and we spent a lot of money creating a 6-story vending machine that's housed Doritos Jack that also doubled as a concert stage. And our thinking was, if you do something bold enough on a platform that has built-in influencers like South by Southwest did, and did something cool enough, you could get noticed. And that's exactly what we did. We generated over 2 billion organic media impressions in 3 days at South by Southwest. And Doritos Jacked was the second fastest growing new product launch for Doritos outside of Cool Ranch. So again, you got to say something, have a point of view, but then you got to go actually do things in the real world to make people believe that you're putting your money where your mouth is.
I'm starting to catch a theme here about your showing and not telling things. So I like it. Bubblegum and 6-story vending machines. Sounds super awesome. So we've got the top two. Have a point of view. Actually do something. Tell. Show. Don't just tell.
Yeah, and the third one is deliver unforgettable experiences. So we live in an experience culture. Kind of similar to number two, you've got to build experiences that get people hooked on your brand. So many examples of how Zappo does this, and how they've taken something as pedestrian as selling shoes to the next level with their experience and the service that they provide. The story I love most is husband and wife. Husband ordered shoes. They were in the process of moving. The husband went to return the shoes, didn't realize that his wife had put a bunch of her jewelry in the box. So the Zappos customer service rep that got the box finds the jewelry, gets in contact with the couple, is so afraid to put the jewelry in the mail that asks his boss if he can get on a plane to personally deliver the jewelry to the customer, which he did. So that's a really interesting example. But again, you got to deliver experiences to your customer that get them talking. And so that's something that we're doing here at BSN Sports to figure out how we deliver unforgettable, surprising experiences to our customers to win loyalty and get them to talk to their friends about doing business with us.
And an interesting point too, we named a lot of really big brands, and maybe the people watching, some of them are big brands and a lot of them are not big brands. So it's not necessarily about all that money and all of those things. I think one of the key points that you just made was this idea of it is about that connection. It is about that community that's been built. Zappos has a community. All those stories almost sound too good to be true. Yet there's so many of them that they just have to be. Like, there's just so many of those that keep come out that it's like, well, it just sounds like that must be what it's like to be at Zappos. What do you say to someone like that too? Like, hey, that's great for you guys. You guys are super big and have a lot of dollars, but what about me? I'm on the smaller side.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all applies. Whether you're in a local market and you can make a difference or an impact, and as you think about architecting your customer experience, I mean, sometimes it's just the little things, being personal, the personal touch on the follow-up, handwritten letter from the founder. I mean, we're almost $1 billion company, but we're still creating letters that our founder sends to people that do business with us for the first time. I mean, that costs no money, but it goes a super long way. How many companies write a handwritten note nowadays, especially as big as we are? So I think you just have to get creative. Marketers can often forget about the fact that people love personal touch. They like to know that people are thinking about them. And I think you can get creative and do things that are very inexpensive that just take time, but go a long way.
Well, that's fantastic. Every marketer has some sort of challenge they're facing, and I know one of the challenges that we're facing is one that I think most marketers would say they would love to have. One of the challenges you're having is that you are in a business that is growing very, very fast. But one of the things that you still have to do is still demonstrate that you're moving the needle inside something that is that fast moving. How are you doing that? How are you helping people see the value of what you're bringing and the marketing element of that inside an organization that just seems to be moving so fast and growing at such a great clip?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the first thing I did when I came in 18 months ago is I did a lot of homework. The company was growing very quickly. They would have continued to grow quickly without hiring me. But I really needed to better understand the business to see where I could add value more long term. In some ways, I've been in businesses that were in decline, that needed a shot in the arm immediately. There's pressure to drive sales tomorrow. Here, a little bit different. Company was growing quickly, but my pressure is to figure out that marketing can add value. And so I did a lot of homework. I went into the market, spent 6 months with coaches who are our primary customers, and just learned as much as I could and gleaned insights that I thought would take our brand to the next level. So I guess kind of advice number one, when you're coming into a new role, especially a role as unique as mine, where you're already growing, don't just change for change's sake. Figure out where you think you can add the most long-term value. So did that. And then kind of, I'd say advice number two is really make it emotional. And so what I noticed specifically in my situation was the company was super transactional at how it was going to market. And we were just selling sporting goods. So I tried to figure out, knowing that our customer was an emotional group of people. Coaches tend to be emotional. They're doing things because they want to better kids' lives. But we didn't talk about any of that. So kind of the first major shift that I made in our marketing strategy was to make it more about an emotional why versus a transactional why, which is just making money selling uniforms and sporting goods equipment. And so we pivoted, and it was not only really successful from a customer point of view. We started to gain new business because coaches saw that we were more than just an equipment and apparel salesman, it made a huge impact on our internal sales force. Now they get up in the mornings knowing that every minute they save a coach can be spent changing a life on the field, instead of getting up thinking they just have to sell the next Nike or Under Armour uniform or basketball rim. And so I think getting emotional can help a lot. It really does influence a lot of people's perceptions. And then lastly, we're breaking it into small parts. So I'm not trying to change the world overnight. We're looking at very concentrated tests to go at the market differently. And really, we're measuring that by direct sales and by new customer acquisition. Not trying to, again, boil the ocean in one swoop, but an example of that is we've sold balls forever. We did a direct marketing campaign direct to coaches with their state adopted ball and did a little bit of personalization in our email strategy. And we saw basically a 40% lift month over month versus last year on some of our sales of those balls. I mean, we're just selling basketballs, but doing it in a way that's relevant to customers. So we're breaking down a lot of test and learns, not making any kind of crazy recommendations to go spend a ton of money, but really breaking it down, proving that you can drive accelerated growth in a certain area and then adding fuel to that fire once you prove success.
It sounds like you're taking a lot of bite-sized approach, really measuring trajectory. Are we heading in the right direction? Looking not necessarily for an achieved KPI per se. Like if you don't achieve it, but the trajectory is going in the right direction, sounds like that's the kind of model that you're operating under over there. One of the other things that you had mentioned that I think that listeners of our show who've been with us for a while know that a couple of weeks ago, I kind of talked about one of my biggest regrets was this idea of whenever a company says, take all that emotional stuff out. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to hear about it anymore. Take it all out. I really love and keyed off of a lot of what you just said about the emotional side of it, the side that these coaches are very emotional. Your target audience, everyone's target audience is emotional. So while you were able to say, hey, we got a lift and we got a whole bunch of things, and you were able to show some really strong results at the end of that, what was the process like getting people to say, we need to start thinking about this a little bit differently? I want to try something that kind of sounds like it's touchy-feely and risky, but I'm confident it's going to pay dividends in the end. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, again, it boiled down to research. It wasn't just my observation and my hypothesis. It came down to how the market was behaving. It came down to understanding the psyche of our customer, that they make their purchasing decisions based on loyalty, that they care deeply about the kids that they're working for. They're not doing it for a paycheck. They're doing it to pay it forward for someone that had impacted their life when they were younger. We did research and I talked to folks. They're a tremendously underappreciated group of consumers. So any kind of recognition, just acknowledging the fact that we know what they're doing is so important goes a long way. So I think as a marketer that wants to infuse a little bit of emotion into a marketing strategy, you can't just do it for emotion's sake. It's got to be tied to how the customer is acting. And behaving, and how infusing emotion will actually influence their purchase decisions. I mean, we're not a non-for-profit business. We still have to drive profits, but we thought that it would be different than how all of our competitors are going at it in a really effective way to get new business.
That's terrific. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's going to be an even more growing trend, especially with all the stuff you were talking about at the beginning, just that, how do you take that point of view? How do you stand out? There's just such a strong element there. Well, we are coming to actually my favorite part of our entire broadcast. Every guest that we have on, the premise of our show is that we are such busy people. We're such busy marketers and business leaders that we are so busy going about doing our day job that we miss out on a lot of things that are happening around us. And so I wanted us to end this show with you sharing a little bit of what you've seen that you think, you know what, some people might not be paying attention to some really cool and new things that are taking place. And in your case, I happen to know that it has to do with email marketing and some of what you're doing on the one-to-one side. So can you tell our audience what you're seeing and what And again, kind of in that spirit of these are the kinds of things you might want to be paying attention to as you move into 2019.
Sure. Yeah. And again, this one isn't rocket science. Every article of every marketing publication talks about how marketers need to utilize data to provide more one-to-one experiences. I mean, for me, a lot of the marketing world isn't there yet. They might have the data, but they don't really figure out or haven't developed technology that helps support a true one-to-one marketing approach. And what's been happening with the work of a lot of folks internally, even before I started here, was an ability to customize artwork in email campaigns one-to-one based on a database, an image-based database that we've built here internally. And so what that means is that we can send emails direct to coaches that shows clothing, sports equipment with the school's mascot, logo, colors, all at the touch of a button at scale. I mean, we'll send sometimes 20, 30,000 coaches emails. They will all be unique. They will all be in the school's colors. And what we're seeing is very similar to probably what you read about. Engagement rates are through the roof. Sometimes 4, 5, 6x engagement rates when we actually personalize the email versus when we send an email that basically shows your logo here, which is kind of a lot of what you see on Instagram and social media ads. So I think the takeaway is spend as much time figuring out how to create technology and databases that can deliver truly personalized experiences instead of doing it with text. I think images go a long way, and we're certainly going to do more of it.
That's terrific. It sounds so simple. Like you said, it's not rocket science. It's what we read about, and it's what we're talking about. It sounds so simple, but it is work. It does take investment. It does take people doing something with the insights that they see or the data that they have. So, Rogue Nation, I'm super glad to have had you with us, Jared. Thank you for joining us for this episode of While You Were Working. Time really flies by very, very fast. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. For those of you who would like to stay connected with Jared or to follow along, he's got some speaking engagements. You might see him out and about, or follow him on LinkedIn. I'll have all of that available for you inside the show notes here. And we'll also have a link to this episode and a blog post about it over on gorogue.net in the Rogue Think section in just a short amount of time. Until next time, see you later. Bye.